Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Buyer Insights and Intelligence series. I hope you are all enjoying the event so far. This session is titled Using Enrichment Data to Identify Revenue Signals for Efficient Growth. And my name is Claudia Tarico, and I'm the editor of Demand Gen Report, and I'll be your moderator for this presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we begin, I'm going to run through a few housekeeping slides, and then I'm going to pass things over to our speakers. For those of you who are new to Demand Gen Report, welcome. We are an online media company publishing daily news, a weekly email newsletter, special reports, original research, and a rich menu of additional resources. So if you haven't done so already, join more than 75,000 subscribers to our weekly newsletter by subscribing to demandgenreport.com today. And then, of course, during and after today's session, please follow along and share your thoughts and feedback with us on social media. You could use the hashtag BII22. All of our links and handles are right here on your screens, and we look forward to connecting with you on social. I also want to take this time to announce that we are going back to Boston for our B2B Sales and Marketing Exchange. We're so excited to see our B2B community and hope you can join us this August. So for more information, visit the B2B SMX website. You could register, check out the agenda, all that fun stuff. You could check us out at b2bsalesmarketing.exchange. And then for today's presentation, we'll be using the On24 platform. And during the session, you could access pretty much everything you need right here on this toolbar that you see mapped out on the slide right here. First things first, we encourage you to ask our presenters questions, and to do so, simply click the Q&A widget at the top right corner of the screen. Today's session is slated to run about 35 to 40 minutes with an extra few minutes for Q&A if we have time. So submit those questions using that widget at any time. If we don't get to your question later, do not worry. We will definitely follow up with answers either through the chat or via email. And then if you want to see what else we have in store for the series this year, you can access all of the BII sessions on the right of your screen, right under that Q&A widget. And then right below that, you'll find some additional resources that we've made available to you. Today's session, like all the others, is being recorded, and all of our attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation to go back, review, and even share with colleagues. And then finally, in addition to joining the conversation, we also welcome you to let us know how we're doing. So we've put together a very brief survey that will automatically launch when this session ends. You could even pull up, complete, and submit the survey at any time during this webinar by clicking on the survey icon at the bottom of your screen. It's circled right on the slide right there, so you can't miss it. So please, before signing off today, take a moment to complete this quick questionnaire. All right, well, now I'm really pleased to introduce our featured speakers for today. We have Chelsea Madden of Sales Intel, Nick Rose of Hyperscale, and Leanne Gilson and Lloyd of Openprise. Chelsea is the VP of Customer Success at Sales Intel. She is passionate about the customer experience, viewing 3 areas as the ingredients to customer success. And those include aligned goals, adoption for growth, and constant awareness leveraging data. Nick is the co-founder of Hyperscale and a RevOps expert with over 20 years of operations and strategy experience from marketing to sales to customer success. He has worked with all sizes of companies, from startups to some of the largest enterprises in the world. With Hyperscale, Nick leverages his experience to help companies solve complex revenue problems as they grow and scale at any life cycle stage. As both a strategy and technology expert, Nick helps these companies improve how marketing and sales teams work together to drive revenue. Leanne is passionate about delivering value and building partnerships with Openprise customers. Together, they tackle large and small RevOps challenges to provide actionable data to drive better outcomes. Leanne thrives on the intersection between technology and people, helping to bridge the gap between the two groups. She loves the challenge of architecting solutions to solve problems in a new and improved way. And last but not least, Lloyd heads up the data business at Openprise. He advises B2B companies on their data strategies and how best to leverage multiple data sources to accelerate their go-to-market operations. Lem has more than 20 years of experience in the data and marketing industries, having worked at Yahoo as a general manager of channel and reseller groups, running a 600-person sales operation on Angie's List, and leading Rocket Fuel's programmatic marketing teams. He holds a master's degree from Columbia University and resides in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation, and I think I've done enough talking. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to Lem to kick things off. All yours, Lem.
Claudia, thanks so much. Yeah, we have a wonderful lineup, and we have a new entry to the lineup who just joined, who was nice enough to join us today, which is Leanne Gilson. And she's also at Enterprise, and she heads up our customer success, a lot of our customer success groups. So we're so happy to have Leanne, who has such wonderful experience and has a lot of great stories to tell and share with us today. So as you said, it's a great lineup for a Wednesday in the middle of the week. One of the nice things is that with our speakers today, we really are looking at this data question and how to really leverage data and intent data from different angles. So each of the presenters are going to talk about in their own perch on how they're approaching it and what they're seeing with their clients, which I think is really unique and should be a lot of fun. So let's get going here a little bit. As we said, great lineup. We're looking forward. We're all across the country from the East Coast to the West Coast. So just wanted to share a little bit for those of you who don't know about Openprise. We're based in San Francisco. We are actually a no-code platform. We actually help enterprise B2B companies manage and leverage data across their full funnel lifecycle. So we do everything from working with companies to help them standardize, cleanse, fix their data, also import new actionable data, which is what I think really today's topic will be about and how we manage that. But then everything helping them with lead scoring, lead attribution, lead routing to their territory team. So really kind of a full end-to-end approach. You can see at the bottom some of the great companies, the enterprise companies that we're fortunate enough to work with and have for years. And what we find is that really every company's needs are different. They have different, as you guys all know, you all have different kind of rules and segments and ways you approach things. And it really takes that kind of specialized approach to get the most out of data and to help you scale faster. And that's really what we're all about at Openprise. So I don't know about you, but 90 days ago, I feel like we were living in one reality. And then now here we are 90 days later, and it seems like a different landscape, right? There's a different vibe out there, especially in the B2B SaaS space, with lots of different challenges. And it reminded me a little bit of what maybe one of our favorite movie characters, Dorothy, might have felt like. Obviously, there's that scene in the movie The Wizard of Oz where she is wrapped up in this tornado and she finds herself in the land of Oz. And she says to her little dog, Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. So I don't know about you, but it kind of feels that way. Everybody was going for growth, and now things have changed, right? A really tectonic shift, and I know a lot of our speakers, several of our speakers will talk about that today. So they kind of set the stage, and we all have our own variations of this in our perspectives, but as we hear again and again, growth for growth's sake is really no longer the North Star. I don't want to say it's frowned upon, but yes, it's probably frowned upon. And depending on your board and what kind of funding you have, you're hearing it nonstop. And certainly you're hearing it in the press. And the phrase, the mantra, efficient growth is becoming a buzzword in Silicon Valley and across the country in our space. And we're going to try to, I don't want to say unpack it, but we're going to talk about a little bit, especially as it relates to data. And for all of us, I know on the panel and for you all, we're spending a lot of time rethinking what we're doing, our game plans, our playbooks, the go-to-marketing motion that we have, and also the metrics that we're holding our teams accountable for, that we might be sharing with Wall Street or sharing with our investors. If you're on the sales, if you're in the revenue world, which I'm sure all of you are, if you're head of demand gen or growth, or the person who is tasked to be the champion of rev ops or marketing ops, you know that targets are being revised constantly. Everything from revenue targets to marketing metrics, it's a changing world, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. And part of that is, what does that mean for your ICP? So we're going to have several folks on the panel talk about changes to the ICP. Nick Rose, who you heard introduced, who leads a leading consulting strategist firm, is going to talk about what does that mean? And when is it time to revisit your ICP and also rethink your TAM? Because your TAM has changed now, right? Because you're not really going after growth at all costs. And then obviously, what are your best fit prospects? That's changing. And wrapped up in all of this, fueling all of this, is data. And if you're like most companies that we talk with, your data strategy has been getting you by, or if you have been neglecting your strategy for a few years, meaning not updating your contacts, not really ingesting new signals, now is the time to do it because it's got to be done. It's a must-have to survive in this new world. So wanted to level set just a little bit about intent data and all the different data signals that we're going to talk about, the team is going to talk about in today's presentation. One important thing is that traditional B2B data signals, like firmographics, technographics, which we'll talk about, really are useful signals to infer intent. They might not always be in the intent bucket when you talk to certain companies, but certainly those are the tried and true and very still have a lot of impact when we're looking at intent. So obviously we're all very familiar with firmographics, the size of the company, number of employees, the revenue size of the companies. Those remain the benchmarks, the bulwarks of how a lot of segmentation is done. There's the technographics, which are all about what kind of technologies you're using. Are you a certain shop for CRM? What kind of marketing automation platform? Do you have a payments platform? Things like that. So those are really as I think we'll all agree, the stalwarts. But then you have on the right, things like psychographics, right? New leadership changes, things that you're reading that are about changing the company, things that new products that a company might have launched, if they have wanted to go a little bit farther down the funnel or more long tail and appeal to mid-market or small businesses. Do they have a new freemium product? All those things which would necessitate maybe a change in pricing, things that you see in the press or things on their website that they're promoting, those are super important. And we actually believe those are valuable intent signals. And sadly, if you're like most companies, you're not really leveraging them. Either you don't have access to them yet, or you're not really putting them into the flow. And we're going to talk about that today. So let's talk about some of the new signals for intent, or the ones that are really that we're going to be talking about today. Obviously, intent data around engagement. So we're all familiar with using content syndication, having the white paper downloaded, knowing who downloaded that at a certain company and saying, okay, that's great. So they're showing intent, or search terms that a company might be using if they're searching for cyber security or data storage. Those are obviously valuable signals, external signals that we would say are very important. There are also a bunch of other signals that I think we might touch on today, which is content. We see a lot of companies that are leveraging what a company is doing on their website, what kind of content they're creating, their blogs, and things that they're putting out across the industry. And really in the middle here is really the gold mine. I think the first party touches, and I know Chelsea is going to talk about this, and also Leanne, about things that are happening on your website, or once you get a customer and they're in your ecosystem, all those touch points, those engagement levers, those thresholds, how do you score them? How do you interpret them? That's really the gold mine of what you should be doing. Sadly, a lot of companies don't. We're going to give you some tricks to do. And two other ones, social. What is a company doing on the social graph? And also, what kind of reviews are they being given? So in the old days, it was, how many reviews did you get? Now, because of AI, a lot of companies can tell you exactly what those reviews are saying. They can give you a dashboard of those, valuable information. And then lastly, is the company growing? Are they investing in themselves? Are they doing marketing? So all these are really super valuable signals that everyone should consider, and they're out there. While they're out there, sadly, I think a lot of companies are not taking advantage of them. And here, there's a lot of challenges and barriers, I think, that all of us can see here. Let's look at the external ones. So I think a lot of questions we get asked at Openprise, and I know several of the panelists will address, are, okay, really, what kind of data sets? There's a lot of data out there. What is best for my use case, my industry, where I am, what kind of product I have? It can be confusing because there are a lot of options out there. And then when you add to that the number of vendors, of course, we all get tons of emails and solicitations, all the different data vendors out there that we see, which ones to trust? Who can actually specialize in what I need? How do I sift through how they talk about their data, whether it's human verified data or not? When you add different geos or GDPR kind of things, it gets very confusing. And then can I test it? So before I have to commit to a long-term deal, can I actually take it for a test drive? And see what's going on. And then internally, I know we're going to talk about, let's say you have the data, but do you actually have the necessary resources to do the integration? Obviously, with the pressure on the finances, will your CFO approve yet another addition to your tech stack? And then really, how do you effectively kind of put all these things together? And, I was wondering, Chelsea, I know we were talking, and I know when we were talking, you kind of see some of the same challenges or get some of the same questions from companies that you're working with, don't you, in terms of kind of how they're trying to figure all this stuff out and what kind of challenges they have?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Lem. I think you hit the nail on the head with these questions, right? On what do I look for externally, and then how do I champion for these resources internally? You're right on.
Yeah, and Nick, I know you at Hyperscale, as you advise companies, a lot of what you do is really around this, right? It's around kind of mapping out that roadmap for companies to deal with both external, but also how do they move it through their organizations, right?
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, a lot of it comes down to education, specifically internally, because, this market's so, I don't want to say fragmented, but obscure, right, in a lot of ways, because you don't know what data is needed, how to find that data, how to leverage it. And then you have multiple data vendors all saying they can do the same thing, which really kind of creates you need multiple tools at times. So, very much so.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, Chelsea, I wanted to kind of turn it over to you and talk, because you have this, obviously you are a leading data provider out there, helping hundreds, thousands of companies with their data, acquire new data. It's a wonderful perspective that you have, and wanted to kind of have you talk a little bit about what you're seeing across all those customers.
Thanks so much, Lem. I really appreciate it. So I'm with Sales Intel, and we are a B2B data provider. We focus on a full funnel solution. One of the many that I'm sure that you're getting your solicitations from, Lem, as you indicated earlier. We really focus on two primary use cases. One is that sales intelligence new lead generation, and then the second is that data enrichment. And Lem, you actually brought reference to this in your conversation. If you haven't been updating your data and you've been lackadaisical, your data is ultimately going to churn out pretty quickly, especially with the Great Resignation, right? So you want to make sure that you're constantly filling in the gaps of any of your form fills that don't have all complete information, but you also want to identify the contacts that aren't there anymore. Where did they go? Because if you had a great, decision maker and they jumped ship to another company, you kind of want to track them down, right? That's a good opportunity for a lead gen as long as they fit within your TAM and your ideal customer profile. But Sales Intel is based off of our human verified data. We have 98 million total contacts. 6.4 of those are human verified, where our team on a 90-day vet and verify process, call, email, make sure all of that information is up to date. And that's really important right now when you think about the Great Resignation. With people leaving and consistently changing companies, we're constantly making sure that our data is accurate. In addition to that, we offer a standout service, which is our research on demand, where we have a team that will go out and get you whatever information is that you're looking for. And we do that within an SLA for a delivery period. So if we don't have it in our database, we will definitely work with you to achieve and get that information for you. But on top of that, our product is actually built on firmographic and technographic data. Lem, you're correct. Most companies that come to us focus on those two segmentation factors. They really, that's the industry standard. I want companies that are located in the Northeast, that are located in the manufacturing industry, that have $50 million in revenue, and that use Microsoft Dynamics. That's my TAM, right? And that's great, right? That is a standard methodology of being able to segment criteria and focus on ABM strategy. We also focus on intent data and visitor intel, which is who's coming to your website traffic. So we provide two products with our leading partner, Bombora, to be able to help organizations kind of gain that information, see what traffic's coming to your website that falls within your firmographic and technographic space. But in addition to that, you overlay those intent topics of what they're searching out externally of your website. What are they looking on the great big web, right? And how do you tie those pieces together? So I'm going to focus a little bit on the presentation today about the intent function and how that's a really good way to align your strategy, not and overlaying that with your firmographic and technographic clusters. So what I did here is I kind of framed it up for you in terms of how you want to think about what's coming to your website. So at the very top, that purple bar, right, you have 10,000 companies that are visiting your website, right? So of those 10,000 companies, we know for a fact that not all of them are going to fit within your TAM or your ICP, right? So what you want to do is then you want to layer in your firmographic segmentation filters. Super, super important. But I want to give you a tip there is, as you can see, we went from 10,000 to 7,000. All you marketers out there, you definitely want to be looking at those 3,000 companies. Is there a new TAM opportunity for you? Is there a new product opportunity for you to help slither off more of that 3,000 gap, right? So you want to be making sure that you're paying attention to the companies that are falling off of your firmographic segmentation filters. Oftentimes, whenever I'm consulting with an organization and they cut their firmographic segmentation, they're like, I only want to work with companies that are over 50 million. I'm like, really? You don't want to work with 49 million? You don't want to work with 45? They're like, oh, okay. But sometimes you have very rigid firmographic segmentation filters that actually cut where you are. So just keep that in mind whenever you see the chunk of that 3,000 in this example. So from there, now you have these 7,000 companies. Great. I call that throwing spaghetti at the wall. They're coming to you, which is great, but you have no idea of what they're interested in. Right now, you might get a form fill from them, or they've downloaded an ebook, or you can see that they're coming to a specific page on your website. All of that is great, but you also want to know what they're doing external of you, because there's tons of content out there. And by understanding what they're looking outside of your website, you're going to be able to connect the dots faster. You're going to be able to make more relevant messaging, right? And the best marketing comes whenever have that high level of personalization. So what we're going to do then is we're going to overlay intent topics and topics that are very important to your organization, your business. Competitors that are in your space. Are they looking and reading content on your competitors? Because that's a really big important thing, right? Are they looking for topics and trends of problems and solutions that you provide, or solutions that you provide, right? Are they looking for industry behaviors that fall in line with your space, right? If they're doing all of these things in a cluster is 5 or more topics, you're going to be in a really good place to go out and engage those companies. And that is where we call that precision laser focus target, right? So you go from 10,000 companies down to 1,000 companies, right? And now you have this messaging that you're going to be able to leverage that's very specific. Your ABM strategy is almost there. In addition to that, you can layer on your technographic layer to say, are these companies using my competitor, for example? And now you have a great displacement strategy. You know they're using your competitor. They're coming to your website. They're actively searching on topics that you care about and potentially other competitors. And now you can focus on crafting a precise message to these organizations that meet all of the requirements that they're actively looking for. What I'm going to talk about now is how do you prioritize that right company and the right contact. So we've identified the companies, right? We have that small niche group of 700, I think 750. And what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on the personas. I'm sure everybody out there knows that it's not one person that's responsible for the buying behavior, right? There are 6 to 10 people that are going to be responsible for that decision, and each of them have a different persona. Each of them have a different reason that they're evaluating, right? Sometimes it's for the purse string. Sometimes it's for integration functionality. Sometimes it's for actual end user functionality. They all have different reasons. In addition to that, they all have different types of content that they're going to be reading out and researching on before they make a decision. So for example, sales intel, we focus on revenue operations as one of our personas. We also focus on sales and marketing professionals. All 3 of those people, the job functions, have different things that they surge on externally. Marketing focuses on ABM strategy and retargeting campaigns and programmatic marketing. Sales focuses on efficiency and ways that they're going to be able to, build a pipeline and lead generation. Revenue operations focuses on clean, healthy data, right? So as a result, when you focus on your intent clusters, you can also focus them on by persona. And the reason why this is important is that I'm sure everybody is aware of privacy laws out there. Intent data cannot tell you who is searching. They can only tell you the company that is searching. So oftentimes, most companies are confused at connecting the dots. This company is looking at my website. They're doing all of these great things, but who do I reach out to? And as a result of that ambiguity, they don't leverage it. So here's a really good strategy. Yeah.
Chelsea, we get that a lot. I mean, I think a lot of sales teams struggle with exactly what you said, which is, like they'll call up somebody, Joe, and they'll say, hey, Joe, we know you're searching or doing it. You downloaded this white paper. And Joe will say, like, I didn't, what are you talking about?
Yeah, no, Lem, I can't tell you, don't be big brother. Like nobody wants to say, like, I know that you did this. Like nobody wants to ever be told that they did something, right? You have to be much more strategic about that and leverage it in a way that's like, okay, I see that you're actively searching on data enrichment and B2B firmographics, and you're looking at my competitor Clearbit. I'm not going to use any of that by like calling you out, but in my subject lines, I'm going to feed in those words. In my content, in the articles that I send you, the thought leadership and the call to actions, it's going to be focused on those problems and the solutions that I solve, right? So you do it in a finesse way. You're courting the prospect, remember, right? You're not being creepy with this information. Great point, Lem. Really, really good point.
Yeah, Chelsea, I think a really good point too is marketing and sales really has to come together to help sales with that message. Because to your point, a lot of people won't go with the right message or no message at all, to Lem's point. But the message changes depending on the intent data that you have and how you should approach them, right? And a lot of people don't take a step back and think about that.
No, I love that, Nick, and I totally agree. Sales and marketing alignment is so, so, so important. When we at Sales Intel focus on our topic selection, we sat down with our marketing team right beside us and made sure that we connected the dots with each of the personas. We connected the dots with the relevant messaging that was going to be going out. All of that is very, very important. So the next thing that I want to chat through is the technographic breakdown. So I'm a big lover of not only intent, but also the application of technographics on top of that. And the reason being is that if you are fortunate and you have your major competitors in the marketplace as intent topics, you get to see when they're actively surging on those competitors. And we're a startup, so we're not the major players in the marketplace by any means, but being able to be on the sales of our competitors is great because everybody is looking for data. Even though you're getting tons and tons of marketing messages around data, people are still actively looking for it. So the one thing that we want to talk through is how do you leverage technographic data. So you want to make sure that you're focused on doing that with building segmentation reports. this is a great way to identify companies that are not investing in resources, whatever that is that you sell or services that you provide. You want to think about it in terms of your content and the engagement strategy that you have for marketing messaging, your ABM strategy. You want to also think about it in terms of your partners that you're selecting, right? Who are you going to go to war with? Who are you going to be talking to on an ongoing basis to kind of to facilitate those relationships? On the marketing side, you really want to focus on intent and technographic data for content creation. I can't tell you the number of times that I talk to customers and they don't even think about looking at, okay, let's see the trends of what was happening with our current customers, the customers that we closed in the last 30 days. What types of topics were they surging on? What was bringing them to our website? And then be able to kind of curate additional content to drive that engagement. Your ideal customer personas, as Lem indicated earlier, and I understand Nick is going to be talking about it here, they constantly change. You should be evolving and looking at that information on an ongoing basis. We do it monthly at Sales Intel. It's a really great way. We're also a startup, so we're constantly evolving who we're focused on, but it's a really good way to keep a pulse on that, making sure that the people that are actively engaged in the sales process are the real people that you're reaching out to, but you're also talking to the right types of companies. And then on the sales team side, right, you want to think about using technographics in your 3x3 research, right? Are they qualified because they have partners with you, or they have an integration that you support, or that they have a competitor installed? Putting yourself in the position there allows you to have more strategic conversations. It's also a really great way on the upsell and cross-sell side from the account management team. So I'm the VP of CS at Sales Intel, and as a result, I manage all of the account management and post-sale activities at our organization. And intent and technographics is a great way to reduce churn. So we leverage it. We drink our own champagne here, and we're constantly making sure that we identify opportunities to expand in the marketplace, but also to see potential churn associated with technographic installs.
That's great, Chelsea. Let me just ask you on that. So I know there's so many different data sources out there, and you mentioned you work with Bombora, and you've got a lot of other data sets that you integrate. So if I was to work with you, or would that data already be in the data that you're feeding to me as a customer, or do I have to go and then do another deal with Bombora or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lem. So our subscription includes access to Bombora. You can facilitate an alternative subscription with Bombora for a larger package, right, depending upon your appetite and how much intent you're looking for. But we do have access to Bombora with our subscriptions.
Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Well, that makes it a lot easier, so they don't have to
absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, good. Well, Chelsea, thank you so much. And I wanted to, we have Leanne joining, who's Director of Customer Success at Openprise. And Leanne, I know you have, as you work with enterprise companies who have lots of different data sets, the big, huge companies that have access to all the data that Chelsea talked about, a lot of times they need help with understanding how to automate and kind of create these processes. And you're going to talk about kind of two, which I think are two fascinating case studies with large companies today on this topic, aren't you?
Yes, and I think what you'll find is with these two stories, you'll see lots of places where connecting some of this data can help the buying process. So the first case study really focuses kind of low level on a company's strategy change in routing leads. About 2 years ago, they really were focused on scale at all costs, as Lem, you mentioned. The economic climate a couple of years ago was very different than it is now. And so they were definitely interested in speed to lead. And so Openprise helped them achieve this by getting those leads ready for proper handling by the SDR team. So we did things like basic cleaning, normalization, did enrichment for them so that the leads had as accurate and up-to-date data as Chelsea mentioned is really important. We also took their job title and segmented into job level and job function so that we could assess their persona. We do lead to account matching, so there's some connection to, hopefully to existing accounts in their ecosystem so they know where these leads are coming from and who they belong to, who should follow up with them. In addition, they also did some auto disqualification. So for those students that are researching a technology for some sort of assignment, they're not buyers, and so they could automatically be disqualified and not sent over the fence to the sales development team. And that system was working great for a while. But, economic situations changed, and this company wanted to transition to being more thoughtful about managing the flow to their SDRs. And so they really wanted to use a lot of their engagement intent data, their activity data that these leads were showing. So what they did is they analyzed the important campaigns for this, for their marketing efforts, and started figuring out which types of activities that people could engage in were meaningful and part of a typical buying journey. That required quite a bit of analysis, but what it's allowed them to do is shift to a more intent-based lead routing strategy. So for instance, by coming up with this ranking, they could say, well, if somebody engaged in a webinar and actually attended, that could have so many points. If somebody attended an executive briefing center, that had way more points. And when a particular lead achieved a threshold in point value, then they got assigned or sent over the fence to the SDRs. Now, all of this strategy change, the shift change in processing requires a tremendous amount of data discipline, which this company happens to have. They have a very robust tech stack. They have lots of different technologies to use, but they also have discipline in doing things like tracking activity in a consistent manner so that automation is possible. And that's where I find a lot of customers, they gather the data, but connecting the dots so that the data is usable from the time that they're a visitor all the way through to the time that they're a known person and has answered a sales inquiry, all that data comes along with them. And that's something that's really easy to conceptualize, but in practice, it's very hard to implement.
Yeah, Leanne, I was just, when you were working with this company and helping them with all the lead scoring and all this integration, I thought it was somewhat radical of them to go against the speed to lead, which is the first thing out of everybody's mouth, speed to lead. And they took so much, as you said, a so much more thoughtful scientific approach and with their processes, and it's really been quite successful for them.
It absolutely has. What they've been able to do is properly load the SDRs and not overload them. They've been able to take those leads that are engaging with their content in limited fashion and put them into a special nurturing category so they can keep their eye on them, not forget about them, and continue to reevaluate their activities to see if they at some point engage enough to meet their threshold. Then you combine that with assigning a fit score to the accounts so that the sales team knows which accounts are more likely to be in their ideal customer profile, along with what content's being engaged in. And what you're doing is you're equipping the reps with enough knowledge to prioritize the leads they're going after, as well as have some meaningful information to discuss with them when they hopefully get that conversation. But again, there's a lot of moving parts that have to be in place in order to use the data. Just even simple concepts like being able to route the leads to the right geographic territory requires normalizing geo information on that lead. It requires enriching to get the most current titles so that you can segment and send and identify if that person is in your wheelhouse. Is that somebody that you really need to talk to? Because this company has a fairly, strong notion of who's in their buying group. And so they use all of these different processes orchestrated together to try to better route their leads. And what they found is that this program has been very successful by by looking at the weightings, they can make on-the-fly adjustments. And then they can also easily adjust the threshold so that they can route more leads to the SDRs or cut back if they're finding that, maybe the threshold is 25 points. And the point scale range is really irrelevant. It's just, where's that tipping point? And if they feel like it's too high, that they have levers in which they can adjust the model. But I think the key thing with this team is they're always looking back and trying to analyze where they are and what kind of tweaks need to be done. All right, let me go on to the next customer. And they have this is a little bit different case. Very large organization. They have multiple sales channels. And they have a very, very robust tech stack for marketing sales operations. They have their CRM, their marketing automation platform. They have business and accounting planning software. They have sales intelligence software. They have intent data. And so this particular group that developed this dashboard had the challenge of being a fairly small group within the organization that couldn't get IT attention to get some of these connections made. What they wanted to do is take this data that they have, but basically siloed, and bring it together to provide an executive dashboard. So they're using Openprise to do this. Now, it's not fully automated. Sometimes we're just taking a file extract from some of these systems, but then they can use all of this data that's gathered, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, sift through it to really focus on just that segment of their population of records that they're interested in, and then create a dashboard. And this is just an example of that dashboard, but you can see that there's webinar activity in the dashboard, there's intent activity, there's sales activity, there's marketing activity. So the executives of this team can pick and see, what are the open opportunities? Which companies are they associated with? What are they doing? What kind of intent data do we know about them? Have they been surging? What kind of people are associated with these organizations? Are they the right people? And it's all wrapped up in a dashboard for the executive level. And so this was, I thought, a really interesting twist on using this data, because the data is only good if it's in the hands of the people that can make the decisions for it. So,
and I would imagine, Leanne, that if you're a growth or a lead gen leader, like if that's your title at a company, that this would be super helpful to understand kind of, once you get it, kind of somebody in the cycle, did they actually come to a sale? Did they actually make a sale? Is that right? Kind of that, because it shows the kind of before and the after, in a sense.
Yeah, it is important to understand that whole journey. Certainly results are key. That's sometimes where attribution programs come into play. What activities really lead to a closed-won sale? All of this data is available. It's just, how do you leverage it to better drive business for your company?
Well, that's really interesting. Well, great. Leanne, thank you so much. I think those are two kind of really show examples of how getting the data is only really the first part of it. So maybe we'll just transition over and Nick, to you, because I know you were running revenue teams, you've ran marketing ops, revenue ops at large enterprise companies where you've had to do this, figure all this stuff out yourself. And now with your company as a strategist and helping large companies figure out their strategy, I would imagine it's such an interesting time that you're living in. What's your perspective as you're working with all these kinds of companies?
Yeah, it's a big need, I would probably say, more than anything else. And so it's one reason why Hyperscale was formed. As a revenue operations firm, we're really helping out marketing and sales teams basically solve a lot of these big problems that they don't know how to figure out. You think about the markets that they've been expanding. There's just big gaps across expertise, especially in operations. And most of the time, they're usually resourced at a very low level. And it kind of goes back into the markets changing. If you think about where people were going with markets, they were hiring for growth, which means more salespeople, less marketing people, and then very, very, very little ops that would kind of break through. So we help a lot of companies out, specifically rapid growing ones, with these issues. That being said, like going back to your point, Lim, like the market is changing rapidly. We've seen the job layoffs circulate through the tech industry. Hopin was a big one. They had like a 37% reduction and another 15, right? Especially after COVID. There's a lot of M&A consolidation coming in, and there's still companies that are growing, but they're going to be harder to find. And so this is where you kind of really need to think about how you want to change your ICP. There's basically 3 companies that we're kind of going to approach this in different ways. And when this happens, you kind of have to change your message to what your product is. There's going to be companies who are going to be hunkering down for the winter. They're not going to be spending much cash. They're trying to basically not bleed out, keep things moving. Maybe they'll do some layoffs, but they're not doing much of spend or growth, right? They're trying to keep the status quo. You're going to have other companies that are doing the M&A. They're going to have multiple people come through, buy 3 or 4 companies, then start doing layoffs, but they're looking for synergy, right? Or basically breaking down some redundancy, which could be an opportunity for new technology or anything else that you're looking for. And you are going to find companies that, when they're recession proof, they're going to grow very, very rapidly. Now, what this means is when you go into your traditional ICP, a lot of people would be going like, right, we're going to go for high growth companies. They can always buy. They got the budget. Let's go. Well, that's changing. And so leveraging some of this intent data, so kind of what Jessica was talking about, where maybe they're doing the layoffs. That doesn't mean they still won't buy your product, right? But you're probably going to have to change your message into more about effective growth or how to adapt within this market. And if you buy our product, this is what can happen. You can save X amount of money, and more of an ROI message instead of, hey, this is what we can do for you. And so this is where you really kind of have to break probably your ICP out into more granular parts, or at least change and adapt to it, because otherwise it's changing without you doing anything or recognizing it, and you need to be aware of it. The other thing here is I want us to talk about with leveraging intent data. It's a great opportunity, and Chelsea hit on this too, about bringing sales and marketing closer together. There's multiple ways to leverage intent between the buyer's journey, protecting churn, moving deals down the funnel. In particular, right, this comes back down to where you can leverage, when we were at Mendix, for example, we would look at intent data from software developers. Those software developers, because we couldn't get intent data on low code, right? The low code industry was not mature enough. But we could find people that were looking at for software development. So what we did is we'd send messages about how we changed software development and what to go do different. You have to be able to recognize the intent data back into your product is one example of leveraging or using that. Protecting churn. If you're going into a different type of software product, maybe your marketing automation platform, if they're looking at different marketing automation platforms, that should probably be a red flag, right? Like, why? What's going on? And then that could be a part of, you have to educate the customer, have that conversation. Or it could be, especially if it's a larger company, it could be a whole new business unit buying because of some internal politics. You don't know, but the intent data there gives you a signal to start asking questions and how to help. Now, the biggest thing about this is it doesn't matter. You can come back and think of the reasons, but it doesn't matter unless you don't educate sales on how to use the right approach. Lim and Chelsea, we kind of joked about this, the whole Big Brother piece, but so many companies do this, and it's kind of a little silly with it. So you want to come up with a message. The other way around I think about this too is you can leverage this to an engagement. Specifically when you're in a high focus area and trying to grab efficient growth, you kind of back this into ABM. And so on the graph on the right, the blue box, you can basically map these between X and Y axis between sales and marketing. Well, what you'll see specifically in these areas is you'll see accounts that marketing will be driving that sales is not touching for various XYZ reasons, right? Maybe they can get a hold of someone, they're just not doing it, or vice versa. But these are areas where you can start seeing sales should start grabbing them up. And what you're trying to get people to move to is this green bucket where you see opportunities coming together with sales and marketing, which are probably going to be a higher chance of success, right? And if they're not looking at intent data or any of these other areas, that should be a red flag. And what we kind of call the time wasters, which is this orange box in the top left, where you see salespeople, right? And you measure activity, you can do this as a measure of minutes, but you always have that salesperson who keeps calling that same customer thinking, they're going to buy. And that customer is telling them no, they're not interested, and they've got happy ears. And you can see that by the intent data or anything else from a marketing side where you can go, hey, Mr. Sales Guy or Sales Gal, why are you wasting your time? Focus on these other areas. Get your opportunity. And like this is a prime example, leveraging intent data, right? And leveraging nulls where you can find out how to get efficient growth and start moving everything towards the upper right quadrant. Because that's what you really want to go do. And I think these are like the two key areas. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah. And let me ask, you mentioned something, and I know, Chelsea, you and I and Leanne, we were talking about it, is, the use of data, this kind of data with your existing customers, not only to make sure they don't churn, but the most efficient growth is to sell your current customers, help them with more of their needs and to increase their spend with you. Is that what you're recommending to some of your clients now in this new kind of landscape, this new space?
Yes and no, right? I think it depends on the product where we have. There's companies that, especially like SaaS technologies, right? And if they have the multiple products to expand, then yes. And then usually like where you can leverage the intent data is to educate your customers on the backside of customer success, right? Because what you can figure out, if you've got your buyer personas and your journey mapped out pretty well, you can figure out like where they are, so go back to Mendix. All right, they got their first app, they're doing maybe agile sprinting. Now they figure out like, how do we really do architecture? And they're starting to research that. Oh, it's a great way to do nurture information, get them faster to that next phase into buying a bigger product. Those are ways you can leverage it. I think for companies that have multiple products they can expand and grow that way, then yes, it's usually the best way because your customers are going to keep sticking with you for the full time, and they're going to be struggling right now too. So how do you make them successful with your product as much as you can?
Great. Yeah, no, I see what you mean. Yeah. And I would imagine, as you said, that, this is a time when a lot of companies that you're advising are having to change their ICP and how they view their TAM and get smaller, right? Get more focused, aim small, miss small kind of approach.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think it kind of comes back down to the use case that Leanne said too, right? Some companies are even starting to think about how do they break up to their people versus to these growth companies or these companies that are needing to effectively grow either by acquisition or they're hunkering down, because you need to have a different message with that. And kind of going back to the intent area, having a BDR focus on one message clearly makes it way more efficient than them trying to figure out what 3 messages they should go do depending on the customer's information when they don't really know. So, yeah, so then let's probably go to the takeaways here.
Yeah, no, I think those are great. I mean, it's amazing. I think you guys all have, I don't want to say different perspectives, but you come at it in different ways. I think, Leanne, you kind of helping enterprise companies kind of take those data signals and kind of recognize different surges at different engagement levels, how to kind of take all these different signals together and kind of make some of those, make it work more. We talked about, obviously, Nick, you mentioned the great point about rethinking your ICP at this time, which, is so important. And I think we all have stories where we've all been in meeting rooms. I think, Nick, you mentioned at one time where there was the CMO and the CRO, And when they talk about who they're going after, right, they kind of have a big argument. They don't even know who they're going after, right?
Yeah, it's happened more times than I would like to think, right? And there's assumptions that will be made, but they're not on the same level. And if they're not on the same level, it's not translating back down to the front line at all. And so like times like this, just reaffirming is a big deal for people.
Right. Yeah. Another takeaway, I think, Chelsea, you really kind of nailed it, which is how to align sales and marketing teams for that collaboration. Because as you said, right, Chelsea, there's so much disconnect between the salespeople. How do they take the data, the intent data, and have that right conversation with them, right?
That's right. If you leave intent data with salespeople, you end up by getting a lot of big brother messaging, and that's a little creepy. So marketing is definitely needed there to finesse that, and having that alignment is really helpful.
Right. And I think, Leanne, your takeaway, one of the takeaways, I think, one of the great case studies that you have is that company that has really gone and made sure that they're passing along the lead to the right people when it's really going to yield the most out of that conversation. So they're not wasting all these resources. And I know that they took a while to do that, but they seem very happy with that. And I guess that's probably a great lesson for company these days. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And I think one of the challenges is the people that implement these new strategies, it takes a while. And so it requires education on what everything is involved to make the shift, so that the stakeholders have patience and the processes are changed properly and successfully. Not an easy feat to do.
Yeah, no, I thought it was kind of bold of them, and now they're kind of a forerunner, because I think a lot more companies are going to be doing that in the new changing landscape. Well, great. Well, I think these are wonderful takeaways. I really want to thank you guys for kind of approaching it from these different angles. And Claudia, I know we probably have questions from the group. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Awesome insights, great energy. I love it. I love it. We did get some really great questions in as well, and I think we have some time. But before we get to those questions, I just want to remind everyone once again to please share your thoughts and feedback before logging off today. You can do so by clicking that survey icon right now, or just wait for the survey to launch when the session ends. All right. Let's get to those questions. First one, some of the most efficient growth comes from servicing and growing revenue from a current customer base. What are some of the ways that companies can leverage intent data to prevent churn and increase cross-selling?
Ooh. Do you want me to take that chance?
Yeah.
Somebody jump in.
Nick, do you want to take a stab at it first?
Yeah, I'll take a stab for it first. So I think it depends on your buyer's journey and your products. When looking at certain, especially intent data to prevent churn, I would probably look at different groupings. I go back down to the software development piece as an example. Look at different key areas. If they're starting to look at software development, you probably have a concern there that there might be churn. And then you probably would want to take plays out there either to help educate services or see if there's another buying group there. But leveraging, kind of like the same areas when they were starting to look at intent signals to buy from marketing early on, you can kind of leverage that same work in the backside of churn to help prevent that. And then it's just an education process as an answer or a service piece, or maybe it's not churn, it could be a false positive, right? So those are things you can look at. Chelsea, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, Nick, I think that's definitely the workflow that we use here at Sales Intel. The other thing that we use is from a technographic perspective, if you start seeing that they're investing in different technology solutions that bode for competitors or other strategies, it's really important to keep a pulse on that. And as an account manager, having access to that information is super powerful.
Yeah, another good point though too, since you just brought up to Chelsea, is like depending on your product, if leadership changes, right, like that might be a concern too, right? Because some leaders will want to bring in new technology, right? So like And that's another way to leverage intent data to prevent churn and go, hey, what's going on? How do I help out with this?
Yeah, Nick, that's what we do here. If we have a new leader come in, we look at their old company to see what their tech stack was so that we have an understanding of whether or not there's any displacement risk. And then we pay attention to the technology stack that they continue to evolve in the coming months.
And on that one, Leanne, I know that we at Openprise have been quite successful when people move to, when we know they move to another company, then they kind of want to use us again, not to toot our own horn, but that's a good signal, right, Leanne, to kind of follow up on.
It's the best signal of all. I mean, to have a customer leave a company, go to a new customer, and start talking about bringing your technology in is the best kind of referral ever. And I think what it does is it highlights the value in building that really strong data foundation so that you can be flexible as new products or new signals or new technologies are available. You can use them and continue on with your business. But that foundation, absolutely critical. Not too sexy, but really important.
Yeah, no, that is. And of course, you're only going to get that if you actually have not ignored your data, the health or the relevancy of your data, and if you've enriched your data. So you actually know that Lem or Leanne has actually left and got promoted somewhere. But if you haven't done that, then you're still going to think that they're at the company that they were 6 months ago, which has really changed. So excellent point.
Awesome. Really great stuff. But unfortunately, we don't have any more time for questions. However, like I said earlier, if your question went unanswered, which it probably did, we will definitely follow up via chat or email as well. So be sure to continue, keep typing in those questions. We still have some time left in the session for you to do that. All right, well, that is a wrap. Thanks again to, we have Chelsea. Thank you to Nick and Leanne and Lem for such an awesome conversation. And thank you all, of course, for joining us today. Don't miss our next session. It's coming up very shortly at 2 p.m. Eastern today, and it's called Why Return? The Surprising New Science of Win-Back Conversations. So hope to see you there. Thank you, everyone, and take care.